That's amazing. So does the microbiome change your personality?
There's an entire field of study called psychobiotics.
Oh my gosh, I've never heard of that.
The majority of your neurotransmitters are made in your GI tract. 90% of your nerves go from your GI tract to your brain. 10% go from your brain to your GI tract. So we call the GI tract the second brain, but in reality, it's the first brain that controls this guy up here. So the bacteria in your GI are the ones that are pushing the production of your neurotransmitters, like your serotonin, like your epinephrine, like your dopamine. And when you have different bacteria in there, you have different productions of different hormones. And there's a new emerging theory that says that the way that antidepressants work is actually on the microbiome in the GI, changing what bugs are secreting what.
Welcome everyone to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com and of course from UnderstandingAutoimmune.com. And oh my goodness, I'm super excited. This is a topic that in my mind is central to autoimmune and understanding your autoimmune diagnosis. And I can't believe that in over 500 episodes, we've never really talked in depth about it. But I have found the most amazing expert who's going to just break it down at the 30,000 foot level for us. And then maybe if we're lucky, we can con her into coming again and getting into more details because we only have about 50 minutes. I'm going to jump right into her bio and then we'll get started. And today we're welcoming Dr. Ilana Gurevich, and she is a naturopathic digestive disease expert and founder of Open Wellness PDX. She is also the co-host of the fantastic podcast, get this, guys, Turd Nerds. I love it. You can find it at Turd Nerd or Turd Nerds Pod. How's that? Turd Nerds, that's plural, pod.com. You have to go over there and listen because it's amazing. It's a trio there that they're just not only are they giving you great information, but I just find it very fun to listen to. But I digress here. With over 15 years of experience, Dr. Gurevich practices holistic approaches to help restore your body's natural ability to heal. And you guys know I am a big advocate of as natural as possible when traditional methods have failed to treat or improve the underlying causes of your disease or pain. And she specializes in things such as irritable bowel syndrome, also known as IBS, diarrhea, constipation, abdominal pain. Let me slow down to read this one really carefully. Okay, we'll say reflux. How about that, GERD? We'll have her say it for us. Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Wow, I can't talk today. Anyway, we'll just jump in right now. You'll find out she's absolutely amazing. So welcome, Dr. Ilana. How are you today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this talk.
Oh, me too. And I just remembered how you say it, gastroesophageal. There you go. Was that close?
That's close. You got it. You nailed it.
Okay, nailed it. Thank you so much for taking time out of your super busy schedule. What I'd love to talk about that we really haven't, and to me it was central in my healing, is understanding the part of that our digestive system and our bowels and that whole thing plays into a first enabling autoimmune. I'm not sure if enabling is the right word, but, and then I want to talk about how we can enhance it, heal it, and restore it. So let's first talk about the part it plays in autoimmune disease.
So the majority of your immune system actually resides in the intestinal tract, right? The 70%, if not more, of the immune system goes and works at the GI level. The
Wow.
reason for that is because your GI tract is basically the only place where the inside of your body is exposed to the outside world, right? So you eat food from the outside world, and then it goes through your GI tract, and it is the job of your GI tract to look at the food that's coming in and do a couple of things. One, deciding, is this food me or not me? So that's the first thing. Two, is this food something that I should be mounting an immune response to? Or is this food something that I should be tolerating, right? And the GI tract it's got to make billions of these decisions every second. So that's the first thing that it's doing. And that has to do with, let's say the body finds something in the context of food and it says, This is not me. This is something I should be allergic to. So forming a Th2 or IgE mediated histamine response, right? Then what happens is those people who are like anaphylactic to peanuts, right? They eat some peanuts. All of a sudden the immune system says, this is really bad. It's a histamine response. I'm going to degranulate all of these mast cells. And then your neck closes up, your face swells, your tongue gets big. You're having an anaphylactic reaction. That's a GI mediated immune response. Or let's say the immune system says, this is not me, but this is something that I need to react to the same way I react to a bacteria or a virus, right? So then what happens with bacteria and virus reactions is you feel bad, you feel worse, you feel really bad, you feel a little better, you feel a lot better, you're out of it, right? That's an IgE or a Th1 mediated reaction. What should be happening the majority of the time, which happens less and less in our modern world, is your immune system should be reacting as, this is not me, but this is something I need to live. I need food. I need nutrition to live. So I'm going to have a Treg, what we used to call Th3 way back when, and now we call a Treg reaction, which is, this is not bad. I need this to live. I'm going to do nothing. This is a pass. Your immune system is constantly making that decision with every single food that it's exposed to. But, and here's a big, but it's not like that's the only decision that your immune system is making. Your GI tract, you, but especially your GI tract, is actually more bacteria than human, right? We have 10 times as much DNA of bacteria than we do our own natural DNA, our own human DNA, right? So the other thing that your immune system is doing all of the time is it's trying to figure out what bacteria, which is sometimes on food or sometimes just residing in your GI tract, is a good friend that we should be leaving alone and hanging out with, and what bacteria is pathogenic that we should be mounting a response to. And so that is a massive job before we introduce anything from the outside world in. But then we introduce food from the outside world. And depending on the food that we're introducing into our bodies, it's going to affect the bacteria that is our friend or the bacteria that isn't really our friend, but we're giving a lot of space in the GI tract that's going to affect the immune response. So it's like a super complicated orchestra where every single part of the digestive tract has to be doing its part for it to work effectively and successfully.
I am stunned. I had no idea that much went into having a bite of food. Oh my goodness, just exhausted thinking about it. So, a couple of quick questions. Maybe we want to table one for a little bit later. But you mentioned about today's food. Now, we've had a nutrition experts on who say today's food isn't our grandpa's food for sure. But I've always been curious, like maybe you eat something, you've had it before. I'll just say, how about an apple? Something just very plain, right? And maybe you've tried to go organic, the whole thing. Why does the body sometimes develop a response to it, especially if you've had it before? Is something that we can do to keep those responses from happening? I'm just always confused how people can get allergic to stuff later in life that they've had their whole life.
That is a great question. And I think part of it, not the whole process, but part of it does have to do with the microbiome shift. To be honest, very rarely are you going to form an allergic reaction to something you're having the first time. Usually, allergic reactions happen after you've already been exposed. So the immune system is primed the first time, right? And then the second time it has a reaction. That's true. I think about iron. I have a lot of inflammatory bowel disease patients. And so a lot of them need iron infusions because they're anemic. And oftentimes we don't worry about the first iron infusion. Sometimes if they're going to mount a response, it's actually the second infusion because after that primes the immune system. But as far as food, your microbiome is not static. The bacteria that's in your GI is not static. The bacteria that's in your GI is very responsive to what you put into it, and it can change from a round of antibiotics, from a round of stress, from a round of getting exposed to pesticides or herbicides or preservatives, like all of these things that we never had in our diets 100 years ago and now is everywhere in our diet, especially when we eat processed food. That can change the microbiome. Changing the microbiome can change the immune system. Changing the immune system can change the response.
Wow. It makes sense. Absolutely. just been reading up on the different types of things that we're exposed to that we never were before, and it's shocking and scary. Backtracking a little bit about the microbiome constantly changing, what are some of your top tips for us to make sure it's changing in the healthy direction and
Yeah.
keep it healthy?
I want to back up just a little bit by explaining, just like me and you have very different food preferences. I might like peanut butter and you might hate it and love hazelnut butter, right? The microbiome, or the trillions of bacteria, also have very different food preferences, right? And so this microbiome might love blueberries, and this microbiome might love carrots, and that microbiome might love meat. But if you're a person who doesn't like carrots and doesn't really eat blueberries, that part of your microbiome is going to die off. And what's going to remain is the microbiome that likes meat, right? So, what we put into our bodies and also what we crave is affected by our microbiome. And we can change what's in our microbiome by changing what we put into our bodies. So, that's it's super important to know that just like humans, bacteria are specific to their preferences. And so, having a diverse diet is exceptionally helpful to having a diverse microbiome. So that's the first thing. And that looks like some rules that I have for patients are lots of exclusively whole foods. I'm sure everybody you talk to gives you the same rules, but exclusively whole foods, staying away from processed and ultra processed, looking at ingredients and making sure you're staying away from poisons. I define poisons as pesticides, as preservatives, the FDC red and the bit 80 and the titanium dioxide, which happens to be what makes paint white. Like, why titanium dioxide is showing up in our food and or our supplements. And the other thing just to say about that is, while there is a level of titanium dioxide that the government has said is safe, the government is not looking at the titanium dioxide that you're getting from your cookies and the titanium dioxide that you're getting from your supplements and the titanium dioxide that you're getting from your pharmaceuticals and the titanium that you like. All of those add up, and most likely all of those are not being included in what they consider safe. First things first, avoid the poisons. You can do that by eating organic, and even better, eating local and organic. Second, it is hard for me to think of a way of reestablishing the microbiome that does not include fermented food. So there was this amazing paper that was published by, I think, Justin Sonnenberg. Him and his wife have a book that's called Good Gut, which is a phenomenal read explaining what we know about the microbiome and what we don't. But they did this super interesting study where they had three groups, right? They had a control group. And so those people were eating the diet that they always ate and nothing changed. Then they had a fiber arm. So these people were eating the diet that they always ate, but they had to incrementally increase their fiber. And then they kept their fiber high for a 10-week period. And then they did whatever they wanted. And then the third arm was a fermented food arm, right? So they ate their diet they ate, they incrementally increased fermented food, ate that amount for 10 weeks, and then got rid of it. And they sequenced the microbiome before, I think at the end, and then I think 10 weeks later, or maybe at the end and then 4 weeks later, something like that. And they were looking at diversity within the microbiome. And what we know about a healthy microbiome is it's very diverse. And what they found honestly stunned me and has changed how I practice medicine. Because up until that study, I would have said fiber is king. Like, fiber is the thing that is going to change the microbiome. What they found is fiber definitely moved the needle, but fermented food exponentially increased biodiversity within the microbiome, exponentially. And so it's hard for me to think of a way out of the microbiome emergency that is leading to all of this autoimmunity, because I think that's really the majority of the underlying cause, and not putting fermented food aggressively back in the diet. But aggressively doesn't mean quickly, because the reality is, if you're introducing fermented food into a diet that's not used to it, you will have gas, you will have bloating, you will be tooty, you will be belching. So very slow, methodical, but intentionally aggressive reintroduction of fermented food, I think, is part of the way out of this autoimmune crisis we're in.
So no binging on sauerkraut.
If you are, it's great for your microbiome, but you're probably going to pay the price.
Yeah, I was gonna say I love sauerkraut, but I don't eat it often enough. And then I was thinking, well, I'm just not. Then the suggestion is just don't sit down and eat a whole bottle at once.
Right. You will pay the price.
Okay. Now, I'm curious though, if I've trained my microbiome or extinguished and replaced the microbiome with ones that like specific foods that probably aren't the best for me, is that what sort of causes the cravings, even if I'm like going to be super good and say, okay, I'm not going to eat XYZ because I know that's, and I'm replacing it with this, which is healthier. And then lo and behold, by the end of the day, and I'm tired, that's the thing I'm craving the most.
So that's a trick question
Oh,
because,
sorry.
yeah, so the answer is yes, it's a part of it. But the other part of it is our food industry is like very purposely making our ultra processed food very addictive, right? So there's a microbiome component to it for sure. And then there's a who owns the food industry is who owns the processed and ultra processed food industry is all of the companies that used to own the cigarette industry, right? This industry knows how to manipulate our brain to make you addicted to food.
Mhm.
So it's a trick question because is the microbiome part of it? Yes, absolutely. But is there a lot of purposefulness to making food addictive, especially processed and ultra processed food? Yes, absolutely.
Just so if I could say I'm going to gut it out, how long would it take? Would it take just a few days or a few weeks or months for to retrain my brain and my gut that my new dietary choices are really what I want and I can break that addiction slash craving?
So I want to say that there is not a lot of money being thrown at food research. So I can give you that answer based on the research that we have. The Sonnenberg study definitely changed the needle. And based on the Sonnenberg study, they did slow upregulation over 4 weeks to bring the patients up to, or the subjects up to 4 servings of fermented food a day. And they left them there for 10 weeks. And then when they took them off and they resequenced their microbiome, there was definitely some loss when you weren't super aggressive with eating the fermented food. There was loss of diversity, but there was still more diversity than when they started. So definitely this process does come down to this is not a short-term intervention. This is like how we should be eating. And based on that study, we're looking at 14 weeks, so 3.5 months.
I think sometimes in my mind, when I know my target, 3.5 months, I can work it through. But sometimes going, oh, I can see myself at about 2.5 months going, oh, this is just going to go on forever and ever. So it's nice to have a target out there. So I've mentioned the word sauerkraut. Give us some ideas of some other fermented foods that were in the study that were helpful.
Yogurt gets an asterisk because I'm not talking about the yogurt that is disguised as yogurt, but is actually ice cream. So you're looking at the carb count, like yogurt that's just plain Greek yogurt or plain whole fat milk yogurt that has bacteria in them counts great. But if you're eating like strawberry or blueberry or whatever yogurt, that's mainly carbs and less ferments. So yogurt, kefir, lacto fermented veggies, lacto fermented pickles, any pickles or sauerkraut that you're going to get from the refrigerator aisle. So pickles are interesting because there is a lot of vinegar pickles. Vinegar pickles are not lacto fermented. They do not have probiotics. They do cause things to be sour because vinegar is sour, but that's not affecting your microbiome. Or that's not introducing new different bacteria to your microbiome. And pickles are crazy. I remember I was shopping with my daughter, and my daughter loves pickles. And we were in some ski town, small, not a big grocery store. She's, oh, can I get these pickles from the middle of the store? And I picked them up and I was like, FD yellow number 5? Polysorbate 80? There's a ton of preservatives that will hide in pickles. So pickles in the refrigerator section, sauerkraut in the refrigerator section is most likely to be probiotic foods. Pickles in the middle of the aisle are mainly vinegar and preservatives. Kimchi, miso, kombucha, or kvass, which is a Russian beet ferment, tempeh, anything that, if it's going to brag that it has bacteria or if there's bacteria on the label, that's going to be a fermented food. and it's usually sour.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's helpful. Probably a stupid question, but I kept hearing the word lacto. And if I'm been told to avoid dairy, are those two related?
No, that is a great question. Thank you so much. It's lactic acid that's causing the fermentation product process. We just call it a lacto fermentation because it's the byproduct is lactic acid,
Okay, good.
not lactose. Great question.
Sometimes the words sound so familiar to an untrained ear that it's like it sounds like maybe what I should be avoiding or something like that. My next question is also about eating. Oftentimes, I know in the early stages of my diagnosis, I was told not to eat specific things, which was okay. But over time, the list got so long that I was down to just a handful of foods. How often should we reevaluate what we're eating? And the other part is that who is best to help us reevaluate what we should be eating?
Okay, let me just start with the other thing that happens when somebody gets a diagnosis and works with a naturopath like me or a functional medicine doctor is they get a lot of supplements and they get a little bit of food. You know what I mean? Like food goes away, supplements come in. I'm actually a really big fan of breaks. I like taking something and then stopping it and seeing if I notice a difference with how I'm feeling. Because that gives me a really clear view of, yep, I need that, or nothing. I didn't notice anything because they get expensive. And what I don't want to happen is I don't want pills or supplements to be replacing food. And again, those supplements, even the supplements can have titanium dioxide in there, which is like crazy to me. Even with supplement companies that I trust, sometimes they're putting titanium dioxide in their tablets, especially. So that's the supplement piece. The food piece is I also like to put stuff back in and challenge. I don't ever go quickly. And if you're feeling bad, that is not like, if you're feeling sick, that is not the time to challenge. That is the time to tread water and keep doing what you're doing. But if you're starting to come up for air a little bit and you feel like you've got a little bit more reserves, I like to introduce a food every 3 to 5 days. Initially, a little bit. Is there a reaction? Sometimes a little bit more aggressively, and see what happens over the next 3 to 5 days. Do I feel better? I haven't noticed anything. That's your food again. Do I feel worse? I'm going to take a break. And the other thing that I want to say is dietitians are like our best friends because I am super trained to look at health and disease in the context of what's supposed to be happening metabolically. But I am not super well trained to say, oh, let's get in the nitty and the gritty of your diet. Let's put in this food or that food. Like I refer to my dietitian colleagues all of the time because they do that so much better than I do.
I appreciate that. And my next question is about knowing when it's trying to decipher the difference between going to a gastroenterologist versus autoimmune doctor and how the two would work in tandem to heal the whole body. I guess is my question. I'm a little confused on how everybody works together.
I'm a naturopath, so that's different. I'm not a gastroenterologist. It is not my job to stick a tube up your behind to see what's going on in the tissue. Also, the majority, not, I'm going to say 99% of my inflammatory bowel disease patients all have gastroenterologists. We do very different things. Very different things. I am not specialized in managing your biologic medications. I am not specialized in imaging what's happening on your inside. I am specialized in getting your body to restore natural, healthy physiology so we can reverse the disease process. They are better trained at the disease process is on fire now. We got to quell this fire or you're going to burn up from the inside out. Right. So they've got very strong tools that can freeze the inflammatory process. And those tools will often give me a leg up to do the restoration of the basic physiology or bring your body back to where it was before it had disease. At least in Portland, we are so lucky that we have access to completely both fields of medicine. And what I notice is the fact the patients that are seeing both of us are the ones who are thriving and not getting caught in one system or the other. I will frequently punt my patients back to the gastro, and the gastro will frequently punt the patients back to me if they've exceeded the scope of what they can do with their tools. So sometimes you need a team, and at least in Oregon, to have access to that team is like our patients do so well.
I have an amazing team of 5 people. Some people go 5. Absolutely. And they all talk to each other, which is fantastic. And I'm a huge advocate for that, that finding experts that are willing to be team players was the critical part of my healing and really understand what was going on. A complete game changer. So I want to shift gears a little bit about this part of the healing, though. As we begin to think about it, what are some of the common situations? We've talked about fermented foods, we've talked about managing our diet, we've talked about chemicals and other additives to our food that is harming our system. What else can we do to heal an inflamed system?
Stress is a big part of our world. It is unavoidable. And I don't think the goal is ever to avoid stress. I think the goal is to work on changing your perception of stress. It's easy for all of us, including me, to have those 3 a.m. wake ups in the middle of the night. It's easy to basically be like, oh my God, this is how it's going to be forever. So doing some nervous system reprocessing can be exceptionally helpful. And there are actually human clinical trials that show that reprocessing your nervous system to change the conversations internally that you're having around your stress response can really get people out of a chronic disease state. Sanjay Gupta has a program, DNRS has a program. The Cura, I think, is the name of an app that offers a lot of support, working on the nervous system component, especially if you've been in a chronic disease state for a long time, can be very helpful to move the needle. So that's one. We are human beings and we were meant to move. We were never meant to be sedentary. I'm also an acupuncturist and I have a master's in Oriental medicine. And in Chinese medicine, we have this concept of yin and yang, right? Yin is cold, it's quiet, it's darkness. Yang is movement, it's light, it's fire, it's warmth. And what should be happening is our body should be this yang organ that's moving, that's active, that's pushing. And our brain should be this yin organ that's stiff and quiet and silent. But we flip the way we do things in our modern world. And what we do is we sit on our butts most of the day. And so our bodies become this yin organ that's cold and dark and weak. And our brain becomes this yang organ that's spinning and running and spinning and running and going, and you can't sleep and you can't turn off. And so introducing physical movement back into the body can make a world of change to improve your outlook and your physicality. And we know that being physical and moving your body improves the quality of your bowel movements, improves the quality of your stress response, improves the quality of your mood. You get the endorphin hit. So movement has to be a key principle. Sleep has to be a key principle. That's also very difficult to do in our modern world. We have lights that keep us awake and we have blue lights and screens. And so sleep is super important. And then the other thing that always comes up being exceptionally helpful is socialization and spending time with other humans that are not virtual that can really just lift your mood. Yeah, I feel like it really comes down to how do you live like a human, not like a modern human, but a human that lived for the 200,000 years before that has drastically changed in the last 100 years.
The lockdown pandemic didn't help a lot of people I talked to. I'll say it's almost a chronic condition of loneliness these days. I also want to be a big advocate for the walking, but I'm a huge fan of walking in nature, like real nature, not like sidewalk nature, but real nature, even though it's not that easy for some people to get to, but never hurts to be walking next to a tree or on a sandy beach somewhere.
I agree.
Yeah.
And again, we're really fortunate in Oregon.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very spoiled to have plenty of both around. What are some things that we look for if we don't have a diagnosis yet? What are some of the key things that tell me, look first at your gut, or should I always just look first at my gut?
I have one skill and no other interests. So I always think you should look at your gut, but I'm very biased. So the first thing that I always talk about is the red flags. With the red flags, where if something is changing drastically, do you have recent onset of blood in your stool? Is it not just on the toilet tissue, which is more likely to be a hemorrhoid, not always, but more likely, or is it like lots of blood in the toilet bowl? Do you have new onset of bloating that came out of nowhere, especially if you're a postmenopausal female? You need to get that worked up. That's not normal. Or do you have some kind of very drastic change of bowel habits? So those things are like Let's assume it's the worst case scenario and go see the specialist, the gastroenterologist, or with a acute bloating, that's actually a GYN referral because that's a very common first sign of ovarian cancer. And not bloating that's been here forever, but like a new onset of out of nowhere, pretty intense, vigorous bloating. So that is like, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go see the specialist, let's have you imaged. The other thing is that lots of people, most people are falling into this functional space where you've got like long acting constipation or diarrhea, or things change, or you wake up bloated, or you bloat after every meal, you look 6 to 9 months pregnant after you eat. And that from me, from a functional provider, what I'm thinking about with that is when I have somebody come in, I'm like, does this sound like it's coming from the top, right? Is it coming from the esophagus and the stomach? Is there nausea? Is there reflux? Is there burning? Do you have a pit in the back of your throat? That would be like, okay, I want to work up the upper GI. Is the main symptom bloating, right? So the thing about gas is when you have gas in your stomach, you belch. When you have gas in your large intestine, you fart. But your small intestine has a valve between the stomach and the small intestine, and the bottom has a valve between the small intestine and the large intestine. So if you have a bunch of fermentation that's happening in the small intestine, you bloat. It is trapped, right? So that's a key sign that I'm often looking at for a patient who comes in with chronic bloating or chronic GI. If it's bloating, I'm going to work up the small intestine. The way to do that is bacterial overgrowth, glucose or lactulose breath test, or working them up for fungus. Fungus is not as easy to find as SIBO is, or bacterial overgrowth, but we have questionnaires, we have some blood tests that are okay. So that would be a small bowel workup. And then if it's really just bowel dependent, like just constipation or diarrhea, or pain, or sometimes bloating that gets worse only when constipation is severe, then I'm more likely to work up the large intestine and do a microbiome assay test on that.
Probably a silly question about bloating, but I had a friend who kept talking up her, I'll put in air quotes, belly to postmenopausal weight gain, and yet finally went to the doctor and found out, oh no, you're bloated. I'm not sure why she wasn't able to tell the difference, but in her mind, she felt like the bloating was there the whole time, and so it must be weight gain.
Postmenopausal weight gain is a thing. It's a big old bummer, but it
I
is
think
a
that's why she went there first.
And I mean, anybody who spends any time on Instagram who's of that age group is getting targeted about what happens with menopause, which, by the way, we never talked about up until 4 years ago, 5 years. I guess Susan Sarandon came out with a book in the early 2000s, and we talked about it for a second then. And then bioidentical hormones came on the scene. But now we are actually talking about peri and postmenopausal females. The trick to that is because it's so aggressively communicated on Instagram and Facebook and all that, every woman thinks that's where to start. And also, most people are pretty dissociated with what's happening in their body. They've been trained to turn it off. And so it's easy to see that a number is moving or that your clothes don't fit. It's harder to say, oh, this is something that I'm dealing with on a regular basis. Oh, this has been here for years, but I haven't had to pay attention because my pants fit the same way.
Also, just there's something to me in my mind when I think about different areas of my body, I'm more likely to talk about different areas than that particular area, especially with friends. It's like a non-starter.
I was at a gathering on Saturday with a bunch of moms from my daughter's school, and we talked about poop, and she was like, "Oh, of course, Ilana's here, and we're talking about poop." It's I come and everybody can feel free, but generally it's a closed subject.
I just have a couple of other questions, and then we'll get into whatever you want to share that I have forgotten or didn't know to ask. But I've read about this for a while, and it's about poop, and I'm just curious. Maybe it's not in your ballpark, but I've read about these fecal transplant pills. I've heard about fecal transplant for years, but now I've read about these pills, and I'm sorry, the whole thing just is a non-starter for me. But is that a thing?
So there's two separate conversations to have about FMT capsules. The first conversation to have is the standard FMT capsule conversation. So you take a donor who's been screened to death and has impeccable stool. And then you take their stool and you spin it down. So really what you're spinning it down to is just the active constituents of what's in stool. Most of the stool matter is gone, but a lot of the metabolites that are excreted from the fermentation process of the microbiome is there. You encapsulate it a couple times and you swallow, right? So that would be an FMT transplant, fecal microbiota transplant, but a capsule one. And what they usually try to do is they put that capsule in 3 or 4 different layers. So that slows down how it absorbs, how it opens up in the small intestine, gets the large intestine, and it opens up. It is definitely easier to do FMT capsules orally than it is to do an enema, right? Because you have to do a colonoscopy prep to do the rectal. And the data on FMT fecal microbiota transplants is phenomenal. And we're still like data is like really pretty much flooding out right now, especially for autoimmune diseases. Like we're changing the way we think about autoimmune diseases. We now think Parkinson's starts in the GI tract and its presence, symptoms of Parkinson's are present mainly from constipation up to a decade before any of the distal extremity symptoms start showing up. We think of MS as a microbiome disorder. That's very new. Inflammatory bowel disease is a microbiome disorder. That's always been a GI disorder. But more and more as we study autoimmunity, we are seeing that the GI tract is a major component of it. And it is a organ transplant. Like we think of the large intestine as the microbiome of the large intestine as an organ, you are absolutely doing an organ transplant. Your personality will change. Your food cravings will change. Like it is a big intervention. And at this moment, the FDA has said, now there's a drug that's been put out in the last year it's put out by Nestle Health Sciences called Vowst, which is a drug that is for C. diff, Clostridia difficile resistant infections. And they've approved this big pharmaceutical that is an FMT capsule shows very good efficacy for treatment resistant C. diff. So getting an FMT in the US is near impossible at this point. Vowst is a $12,000 drug for 5 days of treatment. So that's borderline impossible, but it's very effective if you want to have an organ transplant. The other thing that's happening at the same time is there's this really interesting company that's owned by a naturopath. I happen to know and love her, and it's a sterilized FMT capsule. So they're screening their donors to death. Andrea Macbeth ran an FMT lab before the FDA shut it down. And so she's using the same donors, but she puts the stool through an autoclave, right? So she spins it and then autoclaves it. So it's now sterile. And she puts that into a capsule. And that also is showing some pretty interesting efficacy in changing the microbiome, not because you're getting live bacteria, but you're getting the metabolites of what bacteria is releasing, and that seems to change the microbiome. And that in some ways is a little bit more palatable because there's no poop in there technically, even though it's coming from poop, but it's sterile.
Okay. I think that's a fascinating area of study. I'm still definitely maybe
Yeah,
uh,
it's
a real slight maybe on that one. But I'm fascinated by the idea of your personality changes with your microbiome. Do we find that if we eat a lot of fermented foods and change our microbiome that way, will you start noticing?
Yes.
That's amazing to me. So does the microbiome in change your personality?
There's an entire field of study called psychobiotics.
Oh my gosh, I've never heard of that.
The majority of your neurotransmitters are made in your GI tract. 90% of your nerves go from your GI tract to your brain. 10% go from your brain to your GI tract. So we call the GI tract the second brain, but in reality, it's the first brain that controls this guy up here. So the bacteria in your GI are the ones that are pushing the production of your neurotransmitters, like your serotonin, like your epinephrine, like your dopamine. And when you have different bacteria in there, you have different productions of different hormones. And there's a new emerging theory that says that the way that antidepressants work is actually on the microbiome in the GI, changing what bugs are secreting what.
Is there any studies? I'm fascinated by this. This is crazy amazing to me. Are there any studies going on that I'm just going to say a food. Guys, this is just Sharon saying a food. Sauerkraut will make you less stressed, or parsnips will make you happier. Is there any studies of that?
Who's going to pay for that study?
Oh, you're right. Sorry.
It's tricky. Yeah, totally. That's the problem is we know that shifting the microbiome definitively shifts your mood. And I don't think anybody's going to study a food because nobody's going to fund it.
Yeah, especially something healthy like parsnips or whatever,
No
carrots.
big, there's no big parsnip, big carrot to fund it.
Exactly. Wow. That to me is really surprising. Let's talk some more about the gut being actually the first brain. I'm curious if we treat our gut with as much care. Sometimes I feel like I take really good care of my head and my brain.
Yeah.
But I have to be honest, I probably don't take that quality of care of my gut.
You eat a good
I
diet.
eat a good diet. Yeah, I do. And I'm a farmer market girl. That's my thing.
You honestly cannot get better quality food than what you get at a farmer's market because it is grown in the soil that you're living in, right? With the microbes that you should be exposed to on a regular basis. And because you're buying it from the farmer's market, it is chock full of the majority of nutrients that are like budding to make that fruit or vegetable ripe. So the active constituents within that plant are chock full of the things that different species in your GI love. So that in and of itself, just something that's so fun and simple as eating local food that's in season is a game changer for your microbiome. I guess the way I define a healthy GI tract is you feel when you're hungry, you feel when you have to poop, but besides that, you don't really feel it. It's just doing its thing. And you're much more likely to have a healthy GI tract if you're eating a seasonal, local, diverse, vegetable forward diet.
Now, I find sometimes seasonal eating is hard because when I go to a traditional store, it's pretty much the same display of the same year-round items to buy.
Mhm.
So when we're thinking seasonal, I know when I go to the farmer's market, there's the melon season, the cabbage season, and those items come and go. So that's the way I should be looking at it, is it when I'm forced to go into a traditional store, okay, what really grows during this season where I live?
So I'm not saying don't eat anything that's not seasonal, but I'm saying definitely you want to grab whatever is seasonal. If you do your own shopping, you do a really good job knowing what's seasonal. And uh, I'm an immigrant. I come from Lithuania, and we all immigrated from Soviet Russia. And so I feel like lineagely, my happy place is Costco, which is an interesting thing for a naturopath. But Costco does like an amazing job with seasonal foods. Like you'll walk into Costco and all of a sudden there's like chanterelles that are available in this one section of time. Or there will be asparagus all of a sudden that's available and very affordable in this one section of time. And besides that, they don't have the seasonality. That's not as good as eating from your farmer's market, but that is still, you can go to these massive stores. And if you're doing your own shopping, you are very aware of what you can pick up all the time and what's just a new visitor. Grab the new visitor if you can, because that adds to the seasonality of it.
Oh, wow. I've learned so much. I'm a little blown away right now. This is fantastic. So I'm down to that point where what would you like to say to our dear community here about our gut and things that I haven't asked the right question yet?
I'm going to start with I don't think food cures all disease at all. Like I have patients who are trying to food their way out of an inflammatory bowel disease condition and they're not getting better because I don't think it's all about food, right? And I think food has a huge impact and it is a place where we can be very health active and politically active. And it's a good place to put our resources, especially because the industrial food industry that most Americans are eating, that we're now farming off to the rest of the world, definitively poison to our microbiome. And we are finally understanding that if we poison our microbiome, we are going to end up in disease. And oftentimes that disease is an autoimmune disease. So it's not everything, but it's a whole big thing. And it is something that people have power to change. And then the other thing is, so they have power to change it. And also, it's really hard to make change if you don't know where to start and you don't know what to look at. And sometimes social media is amazing for giving you ideas on how to start. And sometimes it doesn't hurt to touch base with a dietitian or a naturopath or a functional medicine doctor to help give you ideas, because this is what we do.
It's just what you do. Yep. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. This was amazing. I want to give a shout out to your Turd Nerds, please, because I love that podcast. Plus, anything else you'd like to share where people can find out more about you.
So I'm at Open Wellness PDX in North Portland. And then I have the Turd Nerds with Dr. Ami Kapadia, a functional medicine doctor, and Dr. Rebecca Sand, a naturopath acupuncturist like I am. And then I'm in the works of launching a new podcast with Dr. Ann Hill, who you know, and it's an injection-based podcast called The Point of Medicine. And so it literally is all about injections. And we're hoping to launch that very soon.
Oh, and I'm so excited because I'll have you both back on because Anne's been on the show, dear friend of mine as well. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom about our gut. I am dumbfounded. And I don't think enough of us, like I said, we pay attention to other body parts, but somehow we just assume that's going to just keep on chugging along until it doesn't.
And then you know it.
Yeah, and then you know it. So, everyone, have a great week, whatever your adventures, and join me next week for another brand new episode. Enjoy. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I'm a little overloaded with all of
I have that effect on people.
fabulous. It's just so many things I want to go research now because I think a lot of us think we know until we realize you just know like that much.
And also, it's very overwhelming and it's hard, especially with something like food, because it's so easy to do what you've been always doing. So it's tricky to start doing something new.
True, what you're always doing, but then also in many cases, what I find is like family. It's like you're doing your best to stay gluten-free, but somebody's over there making toast.
Yeah.
So,
And there's so much to know. You know what I mean? There's so much to know that it makes sense people don't realize the effects because they're paying attention to so many of the billions of other things we need to always be paying attention to. It's exhausting. Being alive today is exhausting.
yeah, I think that's why so many people either emotionally eat or just eat in front of the telly to just veg out.
Yeah.
Look forward to having you back.
That's perfect. Thank you, honey.
Take care. Bye-bye.
The information provided on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, including the websites understandingautoimmune.com, plus social media, is for educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes.